Gender plays such an important role in our lives. Um, what we wear, what we get to be is often determined by, what our gender is. We are also so attached to our gender identities, to our masculinities, to our femininities. But what if I told you that gender is just a role that you've been playing all your life? That's the question that I pose to my audience when I perform as a drag artist. Hello everyone, my name is Lush Monsoon, also known as Ayushmaan. I am a drag performer, a lawyer, actor, and all sorts of things. And today I'm going to share with you some things about my journey. So for those of you who do not know what drag is, have you all heard about drag? Yes? Good. So glad. But for those of you who don't know what drag, generally speaking, it just means a performance art where you get to be whatever your heart desires. How do you see yourself in your own mind? If that's what you're portraying on the stage, then you're a drag artist. Now, drag artists generally, they perform their own version of gender. They experiment with gender on stage. Sometimes like a man will dress like a woman and vice versa. And there are all kinds of drag artists and performances. But there is no definition of drag. Wait. How do I switch this on? Okay. So the famous drag queen RuPaul says that we're all born naked and the rest is drag, which basically means that when you're getting ready to go to a party, you're getting into drag. When you're going to the office and you're suiting up, that's when you're getting into drag. So we're all doing drag in some form or the other in our lives. And my understanding of drag happened. So these are different kinds of drag artists. So anybody can do drag, whether you're trans, straight, cisgendered, lesbian, gay, does not matter, No matter who you are, you can do drag. These are some examples of drag artists who are trans, who are cis, and they do all kinds of drag performances. And even cats can do drag, as you can see. So as a drag performer, I've had the opportunity to be featured in fashion magazines, on covers, walk the runway, perform for huge audiences, perform for small audiences, which are very loving. I've done all sorts of things. But the most important thing that drag has given me is my own relationship with myself. Drag has allowed me the opportunity to get to know me, who I truly am, and be okay with that. So let me take you to the beginning of my journey. So I grew up in a small town of India called Ranchi in Jharkhand. And growing up, I always knew that I was not comfortable with the gender roles that were expected of me. Sometimes I felt more like a boy, and sometimes I felt more like a girl. I felt more like my feminine side. I was just happy to be myself. I didn't want to be categorized into labels. But the world that we live in is not like that. Ever since a child is born, we categorize them into pink boxes or blue boxes. Well, I was neither, and I was both. I was purple. So as I started growing up, I had this fascination for Bollywood movies. I had a fascination for Madhuri Dixit. And as a child, I would perform for all my relatives around a bonfire. And they would all cheer for me. And I don't know whether they were really enjoying the performance or they were just amused to see a little boy doing a girl's dance step. But that was my first audience, and I was living for the reception that I was receiving. I was also fascinated by the clothes and the jewelry that my mother wore. And the fact that my mother could just transform from her homely look into this glamorous diva when she used to go to parties, who does not like a good makeover? And the transformation part of a makeover was something which was very, very interesting to me. So one day, I took my mother's dupatta, I took some of her jewelry, and I just wore it. I wore her dupatta around myself. I wore her bangles and jewelry. And I was so happy and ecstatic. I just pranced around my house giggling and laughing because this was something which I was doing for the first time. Until I saw my mother's expression. And there I saw fear. Because in that moment, I had shown her what I truly was. And she could see that, what I could become in the future. And as soon as I saw her expression, I just removed the dupatta, the jewelry, and I just went back to my room. The emotion that I felt that day was of shame and embarrassment. And it was so much that I made a pact with myself that I will never show this side of myself to the world. This is just between me and myself. So things happened. I went to an all-boys school, and the sports class was especially very difficult for me because it was such a hyper-masculine space. And so what I used to do, I would bunk every sports class that I had, and I would just hide in the library. But one day, my sports teacher, he caught me, along with 2 of my friends. And he said, "Stop acting like a bunch of sissies and go to the sports class." So I didn't know what the word sissy meant then, but I knew that it was something which was not great, okay? I instinctively understood that it was not something which I was supposed to be. So again, that idea of the fact that I could not be myself got reinforced. I understood that if I was myself, I might be disrespected, bullied, and even disowned. So when it came to choosing a career after school, most of the kids in my class, they had 2 options. Either you could be an engineer or you could be a doctor. But I broke out of the binary there also and chose law. Now I went to one of India's premier law schools and I had a great time there. I loved law. But at the same time, there was this feeling of emptiness that I was experiencing. And I could not understand why. I went into a very depressive phase towards the end of my law school. And I was just trying to figure out what was the problem. The thing that happened was, in all those years of just hiding my true self, I had just become an apologetic version of myself that others wanted to see. I did not have any idea who I was or what I wanted, what clothes I wanted to wear, which colors that I like. It was all a show for the world just to survive. And in that moment, I decided that I had to do something about it. So I went back to the basics. I started doing things that I liked as a child, which is singing, dancing, theater, all sorts of creative things. So after my law school, instead of joining a law firm, I moved to Delhi and I joined a theater group. And it was all fun in the beginning. I was enjoying it. But even the theater world is so binary. Sometimes they would tell me, you're not man enough for that role. You need more masculinity. And of course, they would not cast me for a woman's role. So again, there I was stuck. And that's when I found out about this show called RuPaul's Drag Race. Have you heard about it? Yes. Okay, so how do you go to the next slide? Okay, so this was me when I was young, okay, and dressing up as goddesses. And this is the show that I'm talking about, RuPaul's Drag Race. Now, this show basically changed my life. Now, RuPaul's Drag Race, for those of you who don't know, it's a reality television show for drag queens. And when I first watched the show, I could not understand what was happening. Like, who were these people dressing up and lip syncing and dancing? But as I watched closely, I found out that these are the people who are choosing to live their lives fearlessly without shame. And they're doing it on television, and they're being unabashedly themselves, whether they are too feminine, they're too gay, they're too sissy, they don't care. And that's for the first time I felt that I found my tribe. So one fine day, I just, me and my friend, we said, why don't we try drag ourselves? So I went to Lajpat Nagar market and I brought the cheapest eyeliner, the cheapest foundation. Very scaredly, I asked the shopkeeper to show me. And of course, the shopkeepers would be like, why do you want it? Aapko kyun chahiye? And I would be like, because theater ke liye chahiye bhaiya. And that's how I negotiated and bought my first makeup. And we came back to our room, we painted our faces, and I know if I show you that image right now, you will be like, oh my God, what was that? I looked so bad, but in that moment, I thought I was the most beautiful person in the world. When I first saw myself as Lush Monsoon, it was like an out-of-body experience for me. I felt like I had crossed some line which I had not supposed to cross, but at the same time, I was like, who is this person that I'm seeing in front of me? And that's how I started my drag journey. So my drag costume basically that you see right now is just like my superhero costume. When I'm in it, I feel confident, I feel like, I'm on the top of the world. And that gives me the power to be myself. That has been the biggest contribution of drag to my life. And not just about my femininity. Drag has helped me with my body image issues, with how I feel about my body. More than anything in the world, everyone thinks they're experts when it comes to fat people. Okay, they'll tell you fat is bad, okay? And of course they're telling you this because they care about you and they genuinely think that you should lose weight. And I'm sure some of you in the audience, or a lot of you also think the same thing. And I don't blame you for that because our media, our medical health practitioners, and everyone, our influencers, they keep pushing this diet culture, gym culture, and all those things on us. So I'm not going to go into the merits of this debate because that's another TED talk entirely, okay? But what I want to stress is that the way people deal with fat people is by shaming them. My mother, when I was just a teenager, she would call me Mota, Ganda, and all sorts of names because she thought she could shame me into losing weight. Well, here I am, so she tried. Okay? And my friend, when I asked him, do I look good? He said, you can look good if you lose weight. So all this shame that I experienced, I internalized it, okay? And I thought that I was not beautiful until and unless I changed my weight or I lost some weight, I could not look good. When I started doing drag, I had to look at myself in a different light. I had to look at myself with love and compassion because drag is a long process, I can tell you. It takes 3 hours to get ready, okay? So you have to pay attention to each and every part of your body. And through drag, I learned that, you can be beautiful no matter what size you are, okay? And that is something which I learned from drag. And no matter what size I am or what I look in the future, in my head, as long as I'm wearing these heels, I will always be a supermodel. So that is what happens when I get into this drag avatar. But what happens when I take this all off, when I take my cape off, this superhero costume off? I'm still figuring that out. There are some days when I feel like I'm completely myself. And on the other days, I feel like I'm in dissonance with the world. And what can I expect? The world is so binary that everywhere I go, I'm reminded of my gender. It's either, hey bro, or hey sis. Someone or the other will always constantly remind you of who you are, either a man or a woman. I'm okay with being who I am. I don't need to be categorized into this or that. Someday I can wear heels and dress, and some days I can just wear a suit. And so can all of you, if you allowed yourself to do the things that you don't do because you think that the society does not allow it, or that you're afraid of trying it out, we restrict ourselves in that manner. Some days ago, because it was lockdown and I had to go home with my parents, so I bought my first nail polish and I painted my nails in front of my mother. And of course, as you would expect, I got all the glaring looks and the disapproving looks. But now I'm okay with that because I know that that's not my shame. It's what the world had put onto me, and so I release it into the universe. I'm okay with my non-binariness. I'm okay with being in the no man's land. And that's the lesson that I take even in the legal world. So the law and the legal world, as you know, is very black and white, like literally, okay? And it's very difficult to be on the spectrum in that space, because even law will either treat you as guilty or not guilty, as a criminal or not criminal. It's all in the binaries. But we do not exist on the binaries. We live on the spectrum. And in order to fit ourselves in these boxes, we just curtail ourselves. Just give me a second. Yeah, so we're all like trees. And if you keep continuously cutting the branches from one side of the tree, you'll grow into lopsided. We contain multitudes. So embrace that and give yourself the permission to be whatever you want to be. Not just a drag character, but whatever you think you should be in your life. And in the end, I would like to leave you with one message. And that is, don't take your life so seriously. As long as you're having fun and being who you truly are authentically, that's all that matters in the end. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you to ShivNadarUniversity for having me here.